We will give everyone about 1 minute to come on in because we do have a lot to cover. So every minute is precious today. All right, I will kick us off. I know that wasn't really a minute, but I'm excited. I got lots of stuff packed into today's conversation page. So welcome to March's Tariff Tea. I like to say that the kettle didn't just boil last month, it freaking exploded. We've got court rulings, we've got new tariff authorities, refund questions, shifting enforcement signals. So let's just see how much we can cram in the next 30 minutes, Paige. Quick pause here on the fine print. As always, everything that we're covering today is meant to inform, not advise. This is not legal guidance. And in a tariff environment that changes, I usually say by the week, but it could be by the day, your specific facts matter. Always validate decisions with your internal or external advisors. All right, let's move on. I'm Nunzio Di Filippis. I'm the co-CEO of CargoTrans and a licensed customs broker. Today, I'm joined by Paige Muldoon, who leads our day-to-day customs and compliance operations. And she is also an LCB. Paige is the one that is reviewing entries. She ensures that the classifications are defensible. She's aligning our database with the new tariff changes and working hand in hand with our tech team to keep our systems current. Actually, most of what I share publicly starts in her world. She keeps us compliant, she keeps us disciplined, and she makes sure that we don't have to learn lessons the expensive way. And the sunglasses page, I'm surprised you didn't bring them on here today. I guess they're just, to show how you handle the heat. So together today, we're going to break down what's hot in the world of tariffs. We're going to share what we call our insider brew. We're going to walk through today's strategy spotlight, which is on the infamous IEEPA refunds, and also discuss a little bit of like what's next in terms of tariff authorities that are in play. Throughout the entire webinar, feel free to use the Q&A and just add questions as they come up. And we'll take as many as we can if we have time. If not, we are always very diligent to make sure that we get back to you. So let's go right into it. Hot headlines. We all know already the IEEPA tariffs were struck down by the Supreme Court. It is not a valid tariff authority. There is about $175 billion of IEEPA tariffs that are vulnerable, and the refund posturing waves have begun, right? And it kind of started with FedEx suit filing in the CIT, and the report from Reuters is that over 2,000 importers have joined FedEx in filing suit in the CIT. Now, I just want to give everyone some quick stats here, right? There is over 300,000 importer records that filed entries in 2025, and they all want refunds, okay? So quick math, that is less than 1% of the importers of records that have filed suit in the CIT so far. This is our spotlight for today, so we'll get into it a little bit more details coming up here. So continuing, right? Section 122 has been the pivot, right? And if you look at the beautiful pictures that are provided here, you have a seesaw in the background, and that's kind of how this started with Section 122. First, the message was 10%. Really fast after, it said 15%. Everyone thought that's what we were getting. And then published in the CSMS, which is what licensed brokers use, as far as official messaging from customs, it came out published at 10%. However, everyone has to keep in mind that there have been warning shots fired that 15% might be coming for some, okay? Paige, if you can walk us through, this is a new tariff authority now. You have this Section 122, and just like all the other ones that existed before, people have questions regarding stacking, right? So, how does the stacking work? And are there any exemptions in 122? And how about things like drawback options?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nunzio. Drawback is available for the additional duties imposed under Section 122, according to the CMSMS, like you mentioned. Regarding stacking, the 10% is on top of existing general duty rates, except for several exemptions, like you mentioned. There was a 3-day window, 3-day window in transit exemption. I'll touch on that a little bit later. There were also exemptions for goods eligible for USMCA, goods subject to Section 232. There's some agricultural exemptions as well as other exemptions for goods that are not readily available in the USA under Annex 2. There's a donation exemption, an informational material exemption, and there's also a free trade exemption for the Dominican Republic Central America Free Trade Agreement.
Awesome. Thank you. So if anyone has any questions, because obviously that was fast, there are a lot of exemptions out there. If you need help, please reach out to us and we can walk you through some of those. Um, Something else that comes to mind as you kind of maybe move your eyes to the front and you see the broken seesaw, right? And the question that is around that is this legally sound, right? And so I think I'll take a minute here to explain that Section 122 has rarely been used, and this comes from the Trade Act of 1974, and it was meant to deal with large and serious balance of payment deficits. Now, trade imbalance does not necessarily equal a balance of payment deficit. And actually, Section 122 was drafted in context of fixed exchange rates and when there was concerns around gold, right, convertibility, because the US dollar was traditionally pegged against the value of gold. Today, these conditions no longer exist, right? So there is some suggestions out there that this might be actually an obsolete, right? Section 122. So how long will it be, right, before someone takes this to court? I think that's something that we all need to keep an eye on. So you might have IEEPA 2.0 here, right? So there are and were, right, throughout the past year that IEEPA has been in play, we've all seen a lot of trade agreements being announced, right? And, we're back and forth been negotiating. And so, Paige, can you explain today, since IEEPA is no longer here, are there any current trade deals in effect? And if not, how might they start to show up again?
Yeah, absolutely. The trade deals that were negotiated under IEEPA, like the EU trade deal, the Japanese trade deal, Korea, Switzerland, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but they're not in effect right now, essentially. Because everything under IEEPA was invalidated, there is currently no mechanism for imposing these trade deals. We do expect the administration to pivot and try to put these trade deals under Section 301 in an effort to keep them alive.
Yeah, that's a good to know. So 301 is obviously one that China has been dealing with since President Trump's first term, right? And this is specifically for unfair trade practices. So it is country specific pressure, right? It also has like interesting levers where like if you're doing the right thing, right? If you're a good partner, we can actually take 301 off or segregate lists as we've seen with China. You have a 7.5% list, the 25% list. And so there it gives flexibility to kind of pull things on and off. And so we're starting to see that this will, this is kind of our assumption. This is where a lot of these trade deals might end up sitting. Now, last week there we had the State of the Union, right? And in the State of the Union messaging, Trump said, kind of looked straight into the camera, right, and said, "Countries, you better stick to the terms that were agreed to, and if you don't." He kind of said, be careful, it'll be more, then you're going to face even higher tariffs, hence why I wear this kind of tariff-y t-shirt, kind of keeps everyone on notice, right? So 122 it's just the bridge, right? It's the bridge to some of these other tools that might come up. So a couple other hot headlines here. More kind of like thinking about like customs from an operational right standpoint. Paige, can you just kind of walk us through that 3 day period last week? What happened with the IEEPA coming off and the 122 coming on?
Sure. Excuse me. IEEPA tariffs expired at midnight on the 23rd. There was no really relief because once Section 122 took effect at 12:01 a.m. on the 24th. Section 122 did have that 3-day window I mentioned earlier for an in-transit exemption, meaning that if the goods were on a vessel before the 24th and also cleared by the 27th, that 10% wouldn't apply. That window has since passed since we're in March now, so we can no longer clear goods using the in-transit exemption. We were able to hold some entries, and we were also able to cancel and refile some entries to ensure our clients received the in-transit exemption as well.
Got it. Question about entries that are unliquidated, right? Have IEEPA tariffs on them. Can we, or what would most likely happen if we submit post-summary corrections today?
We expect them to all be rejected. So, in a normal environment, of course, entries can be adjusted through a PSE. However, we recommend proceeding cautiously in this environment because if filings or PSEs are made in a way that does not align with the Court of International Trade's eventual guidelines, then they very well could be denied and it would be grounds for no refunds on those entries.
Got it. And so something that has come up a little bit, right? And rightfully so, right? There's importers that are paying duties today, right? And monthly statements. Then they're for entries from last month, right? And they have IEEPA attached to it. And they're thinking, well, IEEPA was struck down. And there's this whole refund process that we're going to talk about that we're trying to go after. Why should I continue to pay? And then I have to go after this money. It seems kind of silly, right? Um, but what should these importers do? If an importer asks, hey, can we not pay the IEEPA? Can we just not pay the ACH, not approve the payment? What do you say to that?
First, I agree it's so silly because we should be able to withhold those payments. But unfortunately, from a risk standpoint, that just creates more immediate downside than allowing payment and pursuing the refund through recovery channels. CBP would treat a rejected ACH statement or a non-paid statement as non-paid duties. You could end up with interest, sanctions. There's a lot of things that would go into not paying the duties that were lawful at the time of entry.
Okay, so we continue to all stay tariffied is basically what you're saying.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So we have some importers on this webinar that manage FTZs, right? And as we know, then when they were mandated, right, at the time of entry to be entered with privilege status if they were under the IEEPA, right, kind of mandate. And let's say today, right, IEEPA is gone. They want to do withdrawals. What happens with these consumption entries? Do they have to pay the IEEPA?
Unfortunately, they do. CBP has not put out guidance on how to handle privilege status entries for FTZ entries that were entered before the 24th. We're seeing rejections on FTZ consumption entries that do not have those IEEPA tariffs. So right now, the only option is to unfortunately clear with IEEPA and then pursue that refund.
Okay, this just keeps getting more painful. Um, so the second kind of bullet here kind of talks about a different lever, right? And this is outside of Section 301. Recently, I believe it was Friday, where there was an investigation opened through the ITC considering the revocation of China's permanent normal trade relations status. Okay. So the trade, right, has up until April 13th to provide written submissions of why this should or should not happen. And then we expect a report from the ITC to be published around August 21st. And what is being considered here is that currently China, like anyone that is kind of in the normal trade relations, is subject to the MFN, most favored nations, kind of column one duties in the harmonized tariff schedule. So what this is considering is to remove China from that column one, placing them in column two, which really could mean huge movements. Like you could see again, like we're listed here, apparel rates going from 35% to 90, footwear going from exceeding 60%, industrial inputs increasing multiple times. So it is an interesting lever to look at. Again, TBD in terms of, is this something that'll actually go into law, or is this just some leverage that we're building up for, future options? So we now go to kind of our insider brew, just to kind of share some information in the trenches. And an interesting report has recently been released where China has its own records of how much it sells, right, to the US. Then we have US records, right, through customs in terms of what is declared, right? And the report showed, and I believe this was a report in Forbes, that there was a $112 billion discrepancy, right? So it's a big kind of difference between what China reported they sold to us and what we reported we actually entered, right? So, Paige, could you give us a little bit of color of like what could this discrepancy mean?
Sure. And great question. A lot of it can be explained by simple factors such as valuation differences, timing lags, and even transshipment. Sometimes that tranship country will get listed as country of origin, whether intentionally or mistakenly, but that can lead to tariff evasion. There are other issues with the elevated tariffs that can contribute to under invoicing, misclassification, and that means that this $112 billion discrepancy, it's likely a mix of statistical and compliance dynamics rather than a single cause.
Got it. But there's certainly then probably some tariff evasion tucked in there, right? You have these kind of phantom importers, lots of talk about just cutting down, invoices between supplier and importers. And obviously, we've been talking a lot that customs is stepped up their enforcement. Obviously, the higher tariffs, kind of create a more of a higher evasion incentive. And something that has been pretty well publicly marketed is this kind of e-allegations and enforcement visibility that's been increasing from customs. Can you just tell us a little bit more about e-allegations? I think you've recently been on their landing page. What do you think about the e-allegations platform from customs?
Sure. So I'll talk about the landing page first because I think I mentioned to you, I think that was one of the easiest customs websites to navigate. Customs is making it as easy as possible for the trade and the general public to be able to submit tips or these e-allegations, and it can be from things such as anti-dumping evasion, forced labor, counterfeit goods, smuggling, and many other customs related issues. The e-allegation program also allows the reporter to recover up to $250,000 if the government nets a recovery based on the e-allegation submission.
So like a reward, like a most like the yeah, I remember watching like the Most Wanted show where
Yeah,
like if you okay, so if you whistleblow on your competitor that's doing the wrong thing, we'll even give you up to 250,000. Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Interesting for sure. So let's go into what's, the strategy spotlight, what's been on everyone's mind, right? The IEEPA refunds and kind of potentially what's coming next, right? So some tools that we're evaluating is first, I would say litigation, right? Kind of join, and this is through the CIT, join those 2,000 plus importers. And I know what many of you may be thinking, do I want to throw more money at this, right? I can tell you, right, that there are all ranges of how customs attorneys are, pricing this. We do have a network that we believe are reasonable and fair, especially for, medium-sized importers. And something to kind of consider, right? To kind of earmark, as I like to say, in terms of to help pay for some of the litigation is in this refund process. there should be an opportunity to gain about 6% interest back for all the IEEPA that has been paid. And that can help to offset some of the, legal and admin expenses. Now, the second kind of what we're evaluating is the potential to protest, right? And if entries had been liquidated, there's a method where we can protest them. You have 180 days from liquidation date to protest, and we would do that with interest plus accelerated disposition. But here we're in a little bit of a wait and see because we're still waiting for the CIT to kind of tell us, which is the third option, is just that if you want, you can continue waiting for what the process is going to look like. Now, let me catch everyone up because everything happened super fast, right? Friday, the government basically issued a response to the federal circuit, and they basically said, we need you to take your time with this, right? And they opposed this immediate issuance. And one of the defenses was like, hey, we're going to pay interest on it anyway, so we need to figure this out. We need more time. Well, yesterday, the appeals court sent it back to the CIT to kind of say, no, you need to make this determination. We're not going to do this, and to actually start speeding up the process a bit. So in plain terms, the CIT will determine whether refunds must be issued, who's eligible, how that structure looks like, all the questions that the Supreme Court so nicely kind of left unanswered. I'll give you some background, right? Based on just historical trade litigation within the CIT, usually this kind of procedural scheduling could happen within weeks. But since it's such a substantive, obviously, amount, the briefings could take up to 30 to 90 days. And then the actual refund administration, if ordered broadly, could take many additional months, right? So unfortunately, there isn't going to be necessarily a speed option here. However, I think this movement is positive, right? It's not just sitting; it's now back in the hands of the CIT. So, Paige, people on this call, they want practical kind of like, what do I do now? There's antsiness, as we said, we believe get in line, right? I'm suggesting for many importers file in the CIT, right? If you remember those percentages, there's less than 1% there. I'd rather play in that less than 1%, fighting for refunds rather than waiting for where the 99%, process is going to go. And we're happy to kind of talk offline with importers to kind of talk through that strategy a little bit more. But still, right, we all hear there's lots of documentation that's going to be needed, and lots of prepping. And we've been talking about this for a while. But I think many people are busy in their day to day and will continue to procrastinate. So I think what we're saying is stop the procrastination and let's do something. So what should importers be doing now? And also, could you share a little bit about this new tech toy that you've been so giddy about?
Absolutely. So you kind of hit the nail on the head. What importers should be doing right now, it's prepare, prepare, prepare. Proactively gathering documents, including bank statements, ACH statements, proofs of payment, entry summaries, and the list goes on of things that you will need to serve as substantiation to the government that you did pay these now illegal tariffs. That's really the step one. And like you said, stop
So it's not, and
procrastinating.
just to stop you there for a second. So it's not enough to be like, well, wait a minute, I'm an importer. I'm not on a delinquent list. I obviously, right, in my position, if I'm an importer, I paid these. I can't just submit based on, my records being there's nothing opened. I need to do more than that.
You do, unfortunately. You have to have that documentation because CBP reserves the right to deny protests if there's not enough documentation. And we really want to make sure our importers are prepared to get every penny back that they can.
Okay.
And,
Um,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
And where do they grab that from? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, like
I was going to say,
go ahead.
having ACE portal access is critical. Not only does that provide the report, I think it's the ES003 that shows all of your import information, regardless of customs broker, which is really important. But you also have to sign up for ACH refunds in the ACE portal. And the ACE portal is really going to become your best friend to make sure that you have captured all of your affected entries.
Got it. And I know there are many importers that maybe haven't had an opportunity to pay attention to that before. Something that we often say is before this year, right? For many importers on this call, tariffs were kind of like a rounding error, right? On people's P&Ls, on importers' P&Ls. And now these businesses, obviously, tariffs have been elevated to like top one, two, or three. Like there's a significant impact. So it's really would be prudent on you as an importer to make sure that you have someone assigned managing this, managing the tariffs in your ACE, understanding, working, collaborating with your customs broker, validating entries, all the stuff that in the past you could probably, maybe be a little bit more lazy about it because, again, there was minimal tariffs that most were paying. Now the numbers are so high, you have to have your eyes on this. And this is why this is so important. Get in there, get us the reports. Then what do we do? What are we calling this? The anti-tariff calculator or something?
I
We're
like
taking
that. I
this.
think that's what we're going to go with. I like that. But yeah, you're
Okay.
right.
I just made that up right here on the fly.
Yeah, but I love it.
Oh,
But you're right. We are in the process of finalizing a IEPA care calculator, IEPA tariff calculator that will show an estimate on how much IEPA you have paid since Liberation Day or when it first started, and the corresponding potential refund. So we're really excited about that.
awesome. Okay, so I know we're coming up on time, but we're doing okay. What comes next, right? And just kind of to share some educated predictions here, right? The 122, we have a high confidence that this will probably continue to evolve. I think they're considering going from 10 to 15%. There might be some country carve outs in order, to do that. And as I mentioned before, there could be legal challenges to this, right? I certainly think there's an opportunity. I think the hesitation is, who wants to take on the administration again? But you might have an importer or two, like the previous IEPA tariffs, that step into that arena. So there is a high confidence that this will kind of get bumped from 10 to 15, and there is a probability that you might get some challenges. Also, as mentioned before, this Section 301 investigations that are happening, there is very likely that this is going to be expanded, right? Because this is kind of been proven. It's been legally tested, right? There haven't been any cases that are coming up where we're not able to execute based on Section 301. So, pay attention to these, pay attention to the cases. We will be posting as much as possible and sharing with the trade community as this kind of becomes fluid and changes. We have maybe 2 minutes left. I haven't checked the Q&A. I know Val, you might be looking at there. I don't know if there's any kind of quick questions before we close this out.
Yeah, I think we have time for one. We're getting a ton of great questions. So to all attendees, please know that if we don't get to yours live, we'll be sure to follow up after the webinar. But I have a question here from Franca. Paige mentioned that there will be drawback available for additional duties imposed under Section 122. But what about IEPA and reciprocal?
So drawback was available for IEPA and reciprocal, but with it being invalidated, that's just one more thing Customs hasn't really put out guidance for. I expect that any duties paid under IEPA will be included in any potential refunds, but that's a good question, and I'll do some digging on my side to confirm.
Great. Thank you. All right. I will move on to close this out. Any other questions, we will get back to you. So if the last 30 days taught us anything, it's this. Even if you're not tariffied today, you might be next month. So stay ready. Join us next month. We do this the first Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. every single month, and we will make sure that importers don't get burned by the tariff tea. Thank you all. See you soon.
Thanks.